大家好啊，欢迎来到大佬透镜在 YouTube 的频道，我们用一张 PPT 讲透大佬的深度分析。今天我们要聊一聊中国和香港股市的一些结构性的变化，包括一些从成长股到价值股的轮动，然后也会聊到一些科技硬件、稀土还有服务消费这几个板块的中长期的机会。是的，
这些话题最近都很受关注啊，那我们就开始吧。
第一个我们要聊的就是市场的极端分化和风格切换的一些判断。最近这个成长股和价值股的表现差距可以说是越来越大了。这个背后到底有哪些值得我们关注的变化？
其实现在成长板块和价值板块的这种行情分化已经是创了历史新高了。
对，
就只有2021年年初的时候可以相提并论。那像半导体和 AI 硬件这一年其实是非常突出的，半导体的出口同比是增长了40%到50%。
哇塞！
那成长股相对价值股的超额收益也是非常惊人的。
确实，听起来科技股确实是涨得让人有点啧舌啊。
没错没错，不过现在就是国内的科技中概股的估值已经是接近甚至超过了美股，但是他们的业绩其实是更优秀的，反而港股的中概股市还在一个估值的低位，所以它的配置价值就开始显现出来了。
是的，
而且不光是我们这边啊，就是韩国和中国台湾的市场其实也是半导体带动的一个大涨，所以全球的资金都在涌向这个科技赛道。
了解了，下面我们谈谈宏观经济的转型和政策的走向。因为这一年来资金在产业间的流动特别明显，这背后的政策逻辑到底是什么？
实际上从2023年开始，这个资金就开始永久性的偏向了高端制造和 AI 这样的新兴产业。那房地产的投资是持续在收缩的，这个其实是政策主导下的一个经济转型的结果。
没错，
现在的政策已经不再搞那种大规模的刺激了，而是更加精准的去支持科技行业，所以这些新兴产业会是未来经济增长的一个核心的动力。
明白了。然后我们再看看消费结构的分化和趋势。最近商品零售和服务消费好像是走出了完全不一样的行情，到底是什么在背后驱动这种变化？
主要是商品零售确实是比较低迷，那像汽车和电子因为补贴退坡了嘛，所以他们的数据也受到了拖累。但是服务消费的同比增速是将近6%，是特别是年轻人都跑去看演唱会、露营和出境游，这些体验型的消费其实是没有统计到零售数据里面的，而且这个服务消费的增速其实是会长期高于实物消费的。
好的，那之后我们要讨论的主题是汇率走势和跨境资金的流动，你怎么看未来人民币汇率的变化？包括资金流向会怎么影响我们的资本市场？
其实现在我们国家的贸易顺差还是处于一个万亿级的这样的一个高位，这其实对人民币是一个非常强的支撑，所以人民币是有可能会升值到6到6.5这个区间的。
是的，
过去我们的贸易顺差那么高，但是外汇储备却没有怎么增加，那是因为有很多境内的资金都出海去配置资产了。
对，
但是从2026年年初开始，这个情况会发生逆转，就是境内外的资金会开始回流，那这个时候会带动人民币的走强，然后同时也会推升 A 股和港股的估值。原来是这样。
接着我们再来聚焦一下中美博弈之下的一些受益的赛道，比如说像稀土，你觉得在现在这个中美关系这么紧张，然后出口管制越来越严格的情况下，稀土这个板块会有什么样的表现？
就现在美国那边不是在考虑再次把我们列为汇率操纵国嘛，然后对高科技的出口管制也是越来越紧。那我们国家其实是掌控着全球80%以上的稀土产能，稀土又是芯片制造不可或缺的一个原料，所以它其实是成为了我们一个非常重要的谈判的筹码。那我们现在也已经开始缩减对日本的稀土出口了，所以稀土相关的板块是直接受益的。
看来稀土的战略意义确实越来越凸显了。
没错没错，而且美国想要在海外找稀土的替代来源也不是一朝一夕能完成的事情，因为勘探到投产这个周期非常的长，所以在短期内是没有办法取代中国的这个地位的。
对，
所以稀土这个赛道其实是在中长期都具备非常高的配置价值的。
我想知道后市的展望和风险提示，就是接下来的几个月或者说更长的时间，你觉得市场的风格会有什么样的变化？有哪些板块值得大家去重点关注？然后又有哪些外部的因素可能会带来一些不确定性？
就未来2-3个月的话，市场可能会出现一个风格的切换，就是资金会从 AI 和半导体流向传统的价值板块，所以这个时候就是港股的低估值的中概股可能会迎来一个修复的机会。那如果从中长期来看的话，其实半导体、AI 硬件、稀土和服务消费这4个方向是值得重点去关注的。
是的。
另外地产的话是处于一个长期的收缩的阶段，所以经济里面的新旧的分化会持续，板块之间的轮动只是一个短期的现象。
没错，
最大的风险还是来自于海外对于产业链的管制以及贸易保护主义的这样的一个反复的冲击。
对，今天我们聊了市场风格的切换，聊了新兴产业和传统板块的轮动，也聊了消费和汇率的一些新的趋势。
是的，
最后还特别提醒了大家稀土和科技硬件的一些中长期的机会。
是的，那这期节目咱们就到这里了，感谢大家的收听。
后面是完整版，请有空的朋友继续。这里是 YouTube 大佬透镜，我们致力于过滤垃圾信息，挖掘优质内容，请大家订阅、点赞、评论，这样算法下次就会第一时间把我们的更新直接推送到您的屏幕上，您就不用再费劲去打字去搜索了。
Great to see you. So Heidi was just outlining there some of the divergence we're perhaps seeing that's shaping the Chinese markets, onshore, offshore, the dispersion within the AI trade, and then old versus new economy. What's your take when it comes to perhaps the AI dispersion that we're seeing? Where do things go from here?
Yeah, well, I think, if you look at the general overall Chinese market index, it hasn't done much this year. It's lagging behind the US peers. But then if you look at the China export and also the Star 50, for example, many of the Chinese tech hardware stocks are actually listed on this exchange, and they're doing exceedingly well. And also, if you look at the Chinese exports, if you look at the tech hardware, semiconductor-related sectors, export growth is up year on year 40-50%, and export price is surging as well. So that is telling you that there's a huge divergence that is going on in the internal structure of the market. Basically, the tech hardware is doing well, AI names are doing well, but then the traditional industries are doing less well.
Do you see that trend becoming more entrenched in the back half of the year? And what does the signal from the macro front, including on soft consumption, mean for this?
Yeah, well, I think the Chinese names are getting comparable valuation from the US, and some of them are actually trading at a much higher multiples. And year-to-date performance is actually beating the US peers. All right, so I think at this stage, we're actually seeing the relative performance of the growth stocks, the tech hardware stocks, and the semi names substantially outperform the traditional value names. The outperformance has reached a very sort of an extreme that we haven't seen in the past history. Only once, that was in early 2021. And after such strong relative performance, there tend to be a sector rotation going on. All right, so we're expecting a sector rotation towards the traditional value sector probably in the next 2 months or so.
There was a time when bad news on the eco front would be good news for the markets, right? It seems like we've surpassed that, though. Is that because policymakers are increasingly realising how difficult it is to come up with swift, effective stimulus measures that are also going to be nuanced when you do have, AI and software and tech doing quite well within that part of the economy? Do you expect that we will see more measures?
Yeah, well, I think back then, the story really is that, when the PBOC eased monetary policy, the Chinese market would rally. Well, I think, ever since 2023, after COVID and the economy reopened for business, we're actually seeing the newly created money on the PBOC balance sheet is actually going into the newer sectors, for example, the semi names we discussed just now. And less and less money is going to the traditional real estate sector. As a result, the FAI in real estate investments are actually going down very high, double-digit year-on-year in the latest figure. That is showing you that the economy is continuing to cut back on real estate investments, which is a good news. Basically, the new money is going to more promising sectors that is giving investors and the economy better return. And I think this trend will continue. So I think ever since early 2023, we're seeing the new monies on the PBOC balance sheet going into high-tech growth sector. And also, if you look at the policy statement, many of these new sectors are actually going to be the new growth engine for the Chinese economy.
I think the weakness in real estate is obviously something that policymakers are comfortable with because that's been the policy goal over the past few years, right? But how comfortable are they with the consumer slowdown? And are you seeing those risks increase of a balance sheet recession?
I think the consumer consumption, which is measured in retail sales growth, hasn't been performing as well as expected. Because in the first half of this year, the subsidies, for people to buy electronic goods and also buy cars has been sort of removed. So I think the EV sales alone, for example, this year dragged down the retail sales growth by 1.5 percentage point. And therefore, the resulting figure is a flat year-on-year retail sales growth. But if you look at the service industry, though, if you look at the service spending, right? So service spending year-on-year is up almost 6%, and beating expectation. That is telling us that people are actually spending more on service-related consumption rather than on goods consumption. So as a result, we will continue to see spending on service continue to outpace service spending on goods. And I think this after COVID these days, the Chinese people has changed their spending habits. Many of them, especially the younger Chinese generation, is spending a lot more on experience-related consumption. For example, they're buying concert tickets, they're going out camping, and also overseas trips are also on the rise as well. And so many of these spending are not recorded in the retail sales figure.
I want to ask you about what you're seeing perhaps in flows as well, because money is chasing AI trades in other parts of the region. What will it take for it to more meaningfully come back to Chinese assets?
Yeah, I think this year we've seen the Korean market and also the Taiwanese markets going it's going through the roof. Mostly because of semiconductor names. I think just now we discussed how much relative performance and how extreme the relative performance has been year to date, and such extremity shouldn't last for too long. So I think once the value rotation happened in the next 2 months or so, then I think money would start looking for a new place to go. And I think many of the Chinese names is trading at a very low valuation, especially those ones in Hong Kong. And therefore I think they're worth another look once the money is starting looking for new directions.
And what will that mean for the yuan?
Yeah, I think the yuan has been strengthening. I think it's doing very, very well. I think last time when I was here, I was looking for a strong appreciation of the Chinese yuan. And I think this year, the Chinese yuan is trading at well below 6.8, and which is a critical level. And we're looking for the yuan to continue to appreciate to at least 6.5 and beyond. I think reason being the trade terms and also the trade surpluses of the Chinese exports continue to break record, right? So the Chinese economy is creating well over $1 trillion in trade surplus, and so as a result, one should expect that the Chinese foreign reserve should go up in tandem. But then for some reason, the Chinese foreign reserve growth is lagging well behind the trade surplus growth, which is quite peculiar. So I would say that there's quite a bit of Chinese money slushing overseas, looking for ways to enhance return. But I think ever since the beginning of this year, we're seeing a gradual change in the direction of capital flow. If you look at the capital account, for example, right? So and also FDI, you're seeing actually money is coming back this way. So I would say that and also recently the Chinese regulator is cracking down severely on illegal cross-border trading. So many of those monies slushing overseas, they has to return back to the Chinese market, and that bodes well for the Chinese currency and also bodes well for the Chinese market revaluation as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It comes at a time when there are sort of louder voices within the US to categorize Beijing as a currency manipulator again, right? I do wonder when it comes to the rise of these tensions, war risks might be cautiously receding, but it feels like trade, protectionism, export control risks are taking the spotlight again. When it comes to rare earths, is there a way to play that?
Yeah, I think rare earths is a key ingredient in making semiconductor chips. So I think right now China still controls well over 80% of the global rare earth production. It's in a very strong position to negotiate. And I think because of the control of the rare earth production, this time around, when China was negotiating with the U.S., it actually got quite a very strong bargaining chip. So I think going forward, China will continue to play these cards. For example, these days the exports to Japan is being reduced, being cut back as well, because of the relationship. So I would say that the rare earth names, as a result, has been doing quite well. and should continue to do so, because of this competitive advantage that China has. I think going forward, obviously the U.S. is going to explore new ways to produce its own rare earths. For example, finding rare earth mines on the Greenland and also somewhere else in the world. But to ramp up the production of rare earths and also to study the environmental impact on many of these rare earth mining sites would take quite a few years. So I would say that the Chinese producers could maintain its lead in rare earth production for the next few years.
Hao Hong, always great to chat with you, Managing Partner and CEO at Lotus.